That's all right, don't worry about it, Brad.
turned
Then
it off,
I used to
Brian,
ride
so
my
it wouldn't make
bicycle
noise.
over there. Uncle Jake, they were always either in the restaurant or Uncle Harry, I think owned a bar and restaurant at one time. Uncle Carl, who was another person who was not a very pleasant person. Uncle Tata Lee's husband, he was kind of a sour individual. But Tata Lee never learned how to read, and she was very self-conscious about not knowing how to read.
English.
I'm not even, well, she may have known how to read Yiddish. I'm not sure about that. She may have been able to read Yiddish, but she never learned to read English, and it was always very ashamed. She could add, she could do her numbers, but she never learned to read and was very ashamed of that. I always felt very inferior. She was really a very tall, very beautiful woman, but always felt so lacking, and she had no self-confidence because she could not read. She would get a letter and she'd say, "Here, I don't have my glasses, you better read it for me." What does it say? I can't understand. You know, usually her glasses would disappear, and that was always her excuse for not being able to read. And with having a sister who was so outstanding, I'm sure that this was always sort of a bone in her throat. But those two women could have baked for the world. They were incredible.
How did you wind up moving out of Chicago and coming to Cleveland?
We came to Cleveland, actually we came to Cleveland twice. Once in 1943, my father at that time worked for what was called the Nationwide News Company, which was actually the Racing Forum in Chicago. And Mr. McBride, Art McBride Sr., was a Cleveland, and moved to Cleveland, although I believe he may have originally started out in Chicago.
Who cares about
And Reagan,
Mr. McBride?
well, who was my
important.
father's boss, that's how my father met Mr. McBride. Mr. McBride took a liking to him and finally said, well, he really wanted the only yellow cab company in Cleveland, as well as being the distributor for the racing. He wanted my father to come here and be his bookkeeper. Moved here, it was in April, and a strange time to move because it was right in the middle of my junior year in high school. And we moved and rented a home on Yorkshire Road.
Right behind where you bought a house,
3114 East Yorkshire Road. And I went to Heights High School for April, May, and June, where I got to know quite a number of people, and incidentally, where I first met Marvin Zelman in a history class, and that's where we first met.
Huh.
In 1943. And then we moved back to Chicago in, I believe it was that summer, July or August. Somehow what they thought was going to work out did not work out. But my father, during the year between between July of 43 and November of 44, actually used to work in Cleveland and come home on weekends, as I recall. He rode the
In
train.
1944,
Wait, I have a
he was
question.
doing this?
Was
Yeah.
that you only went to Heights for 3 months?
That's right.
You
I
never
was only in
graduated
high
from
school.
Heights?
Pardon?
You didn't graduate from Heights?
No, I graduated from high school in Chicago.
Oh my
from
goodness,
Austin
I never
High.
knew this.
I never
Yeah.
did it.
I went to, so I went back to Austin High School in the fall. Wait a minute now. Yeah, I went back to Austin High in the fall,
You graduated?
and I graduated in, I guess it was,
January?
no, strike it. I'm a little confused here now, because I graduated in June, I'm sorry, I graduated in June of 43.
Oh, so you moved in 42 for a little bit.
Wait a second. Because in November, I think in November of oh, I'm sorry. We moved here in November of 43, I guess. And I graduated from Austin High when did you 43? In June of 43. Yeah, we must have made the first move in June of 42. I mean, in April of 42. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway.
Who cares?
Yeah, right.
The war was on, right?
That was in Chicago,
Right,
and then
war.
we moved
What about
here in
the war?
November of 43. That's it. What I did was I took courses in night school at Northwestern. I took one course in public, in composition, English composition at Northwestern Night School. And didn't start regular school because I knew we would be moving here to Cleveland. About which, incidentally, I was very unhappy. I hated to move here because my life was in Chicago. Our whole family was there, all our friends were there, and it was, we knew no one in Cleveland. And I remember being so pissed because we had to move before New Year's Eve, and I had a party for New Year's Eve that year and date with somebody from the north side of Chicago. That's where the rich kids lived. And his name was Bobby Lubin. Bobby Lubin and Bobby Holland, who owned the Hollands owned a canning vegetable. Oh, that was megabucks. But Bobby Lubin was adorable.
Mother, when was the grand jury and where?
No, it wasn't the grand jury. You're talking about the Kefauver Committee. That occurred in Cleveland, but that backs up to, that went on to about 1949.
You were on it?
My father testified before.
Grandfather.
My father testified before the Kefauver Committee because Nationwide News Service was providing information to bookies. It's not just the racing form. No, Reagan published the racing form. The bookies got the information from the track, and they used to. In other words, the bookmaking was and still is illegal in most states in the United States.
So that's why there were all those bookies at Grandma's funeral. Okay.
That's right. The Short Vincent characters came to my mother's funeral. By the time my father died, there were none of them left.
Oh, no, that's right.
But that was, that's sort of jumping the gun. Anyway.
Well, I just wanted to know.
Yeah. Incidentally, my father's family, my grandfather Benjamin was a poor little tailor who in a good week maybe made $7, and there weren't $7 a week, and there weren't too many good weeks. And my father quit school at the age of 11.
Grandpa Joe.
Grandpa Joe quit school at the age of 11 and became a Western Union boy.
Delivery?
Became a delivery boy. And of course, he ultimately became a Western Union telegrapher. He had 3 sisters and a brother. There were 5 children. Tante Essie, who was the eldest.
Still alive.
Pardon me, Tante Etty, who was the eldest. You're right, Essie is still alive. She was the youngest, though. Tante Essie, then my father, Joseph Mordecai Yussel. Joseph Morton. Well, Mordecai was his Hebrew name. And then his sister Faggy, who was his closest sister.
Was Faggy short for?
Faye, but we called her Faggy. Her name was Faye. And then there was his brother Leonard, Jackie Leonard. I believe Leonard was the youngest, as a matter of fact. I'm sorry, he was the youngest. I think Essie was older than Leonard. And Essie still
Etty is
lived.
the oldest one?
Etty was the oldest. She was very pretty, but that was the aunt who had to get married.
Oh, why, Laurie?
Why?
Well, in those days, when you became pregnant,
What happened
you
in those days?
Benjamin.
you had to get married.
Mother,
and it was
we
a
know
real
something about both